Welcome to Chapter 7. In this chapter, we'll be covering structuring content along with the elements that can be used to make sure the content you have is organized in a way that makes it easier to read and also easier to organize and understand based on the aspect of a human or a machine. First thing, let's talk about basic web page anatomy. Each item has a section that can be identified using a specific sectional tag. Users already have an idea about where to find these items, even if they're a brand new person that's been on the internet for, say, a few hours. Based on this, the majority of pages have the same standard when it comes to how things are organized. If something is completely left field and a person has no idea where to find it, then the usability of that site will be decreased with every different action. However, when you're adding things to a page, make sure you have the necessary sections or the required sections for the content that's being displayed. If you take a look at the image on the left, it is a little different than the image that we just saw, where the parrot is on the left and the content is on the right. If you take a look at the left image, you'll see that the content is above the images in the code, but the images display on the left-hand side. Well, that's because with the way that the code is set up, we actually work with this using CSS to make sure that the primary content is first in the code so that way it's seen first by search engines, and then the other items like the sidebar are modified using CSS. We'll get into that once we jump into CSS. So basically you have what's called semantic structure, and semantic structure means that the information that's being displayed is organized in a way that makes sense. If you had everything categorized as the exact same thing, such as a strong tag or a paragraph tag, then it's hard for search engines and other assistive devices to determine what is important and what isn't. To them, all the information is the exact same. There's no way to break it up. So if you take a look at this screenshot right here, this is actually an assistive technology called Lynx, or a text-based browser that allows you to see what the AB Tech website would look like if it was only text. As you can see, there are 12 pages, we're not going to get to the other 11, of text that someone has to scroll through and organize based on the information provided. Don't worry, we won't get into this much detail. But if you were to take a look at some content sections, for example, the list on the left, everything looks the exact same. There's no modification to it, there's no indenting, there's no way to determine exactly what is different and what isn't. Meanwhile, if you take a look on the right, you can see that the whole entire item is a shopping list. We have different fruits, proteins, and drinks. Under apples, we have two different types, bananas, grapes, two different types of beef and chicken, two different types of soda, milk, and coffee. But let's take this a little further. Basically, if you were to have this exact same list structured in HTML, one thing you could do is break it up by the header sections. And now this should be a little review from before. The very top should be your H1. Then you have these sections, or your H2s, in this case the fruits, protein, and drinks. You have your subsections, or H3s, which are all the items below that. And then you have your nested or sub-articles, or H4, below all that. And of course you have your H5 and your H6. And this list doesn't require that, we're not going to worry about that. But if you were to take this same content and put it into code, it would look something like this. You have your H1, your H2s, your H3s, and your H4s all in one list. And based on that, instead of having it say one gigantic list on the left, now at least you are telling the browser how to break it up based on the tags that are provided. To you, it may just look like the exact same list since everything's on the left-hand side and it's not indented. You can indent, I would recommend indenting, but if you were to put it this way, at least the browser and search engines know what sections there are and what to look for. For the creation of sections and groups, we have different items and tags that can be used. The first one is an article. We'll go into more details with these in the later videos. But just a quick bird's eye view, an article is an independent, self-contained content and should make sense on its own, and it should be possible to distribute it independently from the rest of the site, or be syndicated. You also have A-side. some content that is aside from the content it is being placed in. Again, we'll get to these in a later video. You have nav. This defines a set of navigation links. Easier for search engines and browsers to find where the navigation is, so it's not worrying about other links. If you recall from Unit 1, when you had to create the list for the resources page, that would not be a navigation. That is just a link of lists, but it is not a navigation, so you're not telling the browser that, hey, this is a navigation area. You also have section and header. Section defines a document such as chapters, headers, footers, or any other sections of the document that would usually be defined by a div tag. We'll get to that in a minute. Header represents a container for introductory content or a set of navigational links. This can be used at the top of a page, a section, an article, or anything else to provide things such as navigation, a logo, or items that can be used at the top of a section. You have main, which specifies the main content of a document. Now keep in mind, the content inside of main should be unique to the document. It shouldn't contain anything repeated, such as sidebars, navigation links, copyright information, site logos, and search forms. There should only be one per page. Lastly, you have footer, which of course defines the footer for a document or section. Now, you may think that some of these items are unnecessary, some are, and we'll get to the exact reason behind these in just a minute in other videos. But based on this, hopefully you have a good bird's eye view about what is to be expected in the upcoming videos. When you're looking at coding headings, the H1 content does not necessarily equal the title, which means that if you have if you have content on a page and it has an H1 tag, the H1 does not necessarily mean that should be the exact same thing as the title tag. Sometimes it can be, sometimes it shouldn't be. But don't automatically assume that your H1 content is your title. It is important to note what sections are needed. Will you need every single one that we just covered for a bird's eye view? No, you won't. But it is important to know how the content is structured, just like the outline of a paper. That's it for this first video. Hopefully gave you a good overview about what is expected. If you have any questions about this or anything in any of the chapters, please hit me up on email or contact me via Twitter. I'll get back to you the best way I know how.